Unlocking efficiency in automotive workshops, strategies for effective problem solving and diagnostic techniques. Join passionate automotive trainer and coach Andrew Uglow as he explores the strategies for effective problem solving and diagnostic techniques in unlocking efficiency in your workshop. In this episode, you'll learn how to identify and overcome common obstacles that hinder productivity and discover practical tips for streamlining your workflow and improving your problem-solving skills. Along the way, Andrew shares some great stories, including a classic case of how one word with two very different meanings caused a major miscommunication, and how a simple shift in language can make all the difference in getting to the root of a problem. I'm your host, Anthony Pearl, and this is the Frictionless Workshop Podcast. Let's get cranking.
Andrew, I want to talk to you about myth number 4 in our series here, because job card descriptions equals quality information.
This true myth is held often by service management and certainly by people out the front, the customer service professionals, and shout out to them straight away. Like, they do a really, really difficult job working with customers. Customers are special, and we mean that in the most respectful way and courteous way that we can. Customers are special, and we need customers. We need them investing in our business. And at the same time, the myth, and I'm going to call it a myth, that the customer is always right, is not correct. I'm a big subscriber of the Dilbert version of that. The customer is always right and should be punished for their insolence. No. But I do have a chuckle at that. I wonder about if that was ever a thing. But it is challenging working with customers. And part of the piece that makes it challenging working with customers is customers don't talk technical language. They talk whatever language it is, but it's not technical. And so when they have a problem with their car, they don't have the words, or the words that they use don't have the same meaning in their world versus what it means in automotive. Does that make sense? It's like a lost in translation thing. A great example, I guess, is the difference between Australian and American. Sure, they're both English, but they're not the same language. I remember being over in the US doing some technical trading, and it was a particularly hot Detroit. Detroit gets crazy humid. Still sticky, nasty, humid. And the training instructors, we had a weekend in between, and they said, "Oh, what are you going to do for the weekend?" And I said, "Oh, the first thing I'm going to do is go back to my hotel and get my thongs on." And there's this weird, awkward silence in the room, except for the guy from the UK, because he knew in Australia we call them thongs. Over there they call them flip-flops.
Yep.
And he didn't hear me saying I'm going to get my flip-flops on. He heard me putting on my skimpy underwear. And we have the same challenge with interpretation of meaning with service advisors and customers, right? Often as service advisors don't speak technical. They're taken from customer service skill areas, which I think is fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. It just means that there is a knowledge piece that they need to be educated on. And at the same time, they need to develop the skill of interpretation. And the reason why this is a problem is for this one simple fact, that the speed of any problem resolution is directly proportional to the quality of information that the technician has. So let's say that again, because in automotive, efficiency is everything. It is like the time is money, right? And so the more efficiently I can solve a problem, the more money I'm going to make. And we measure the money. Everyone goes, "Oh, it's not about the money." It's about the money. It's always about the money, the whole money and nothing but the money, right? It's about the money. And I'm going to argue there's opportunity for some space in there that we should be measuring things that aren't money. But it's discussion for another day. The quality of information is directly proportional to the speed of resolution. And so if I give my technicians suboptimal quality of information, they are going to take longer to solve the problem. There is no getting around this. All of the behavioral modeling that we did over years of a whole variety of level of skill, from absolute pinnacle guru all the way down to I've been in the trade 3 years and next year I hope to qualify. Without exception, the critical factor of their success on any car was the quality of information that they were working with. And the gurus, just didn't even work on the car if they didn't have good information. They just go, I'm sorry, there isn't enough information. You need to talk with the customer and get some more information for me, or we need to talk with the customer to get some more information before I'll even start the job. There is no way that I've got any chance of solving this with the information that you've provided. And there is this misnomer that, and again, it comes out of this whole busyness, right? It comes out of this quick, faster, how much longer, do more, drive for productivity, drive for profitability, underlying philosophy in workshops. That if I've just put something on the repair order, if I've got something there, that'll be enough. Oh, the customer said da-da-da-da, I record the customer's words exactly. Yep, good, do that's super important. Step 1. Step 2 is ask questions, get details. And part of the challenge is I think most service advisors don't have a good framework for testing for details like technicians do. And so maybe there needs to be a threshold. If it's this type of problem, let's get the foreman involved, or let's get the workshop controller involved in the discussion, and they can do the questioning because they'll question far more effectively than perhaps someone who isn't technically minded. The other side of the challenge is, of course, the customer. I don't know. Does it happen here or happen there? Does it happen wet? Does it happen dry? Is it uphill? Is it downhill? Is it turn left? Is it turn right? And they go, I don't know. I just know it makes a sound. And they've never had any problem-solving thinking needed of them, or for them, it's like spelling for a dyslexic. It's really, really difficult for them. And so they simply don't know. And now the job's going to take longer because we don't have quality information. Because the first step, if you don't have it, is to go and get it.
That's right. It's so hard, isn't it? I know even in various other, businesses will relate to this as well, that, the customer will come in and they'll say there's a problem here, and then you can't replicate the problem. So, if in this case, if the customer comes in and says, well, every time I turn right, there's a thumping noise. Well, the logical thing is to go out and drive the car and turn right and see if it makes the thumping noise.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if it doesn't make the thumping noise, then
what do you fix?
You're going, yeah, exactly. And it may well have been what they forgot to tell you was it only makes the thumping noise when I hit 60.
Right.
So, you're in a 40K zone around the workshop. You can't get to 60. You're not going to hear the problem.
Absolutely. And sometimes the customer doesn't know. And that makes it really difficult. One of the best questions that a service advisor can ask, particularly if it's starting to sound a little bit weird or funky with how the car's behaving, is the question, is it there now? That's a great question to ask, because if the answer is yes, great, let me get my foreman, let me get my controller, they can go for a drive. A problem well formed is a problem half solved. Charles Kettering, former head of General Motors R&D division. A problem well formed is a problem half solved. If I can find it, if I can actually find it and replicate it, I'm halfway there to fixing it right away. But if I can't, good luck. The framework that we were talking about, we have a framework for this. We've actually developed it for technicians because technicians were suffering from poor quality information. And so what would happen, Anthony, is someone would go, here you go, Anthony, here's your job card. And it has some generalization or summary, or even if it has the customer's exact quote, their exact quote was very general. And so let me give you a personal example. On the job card, it had noise from engine. And so they've gone, here you go, Andrew, here's your job card, do the service and then have a look at this noise from the engine. And so I go and have a look at the noise from the engine first, because if I do the service, I might change something and the noise might go away. And so I test every way I know to test. I check oil levels. I do all the stuff that I know to do, and I can't find anything that is abnormal or weird or strange. I take the vehicle for a drive and I notice that it's not shifting gears properly. It's got this weird gear shift, but there's not any noise from the engine. Certainly nothing for concern. So I go and do the service and invest another 30 minutes chasing down bits and pieces to see if I can find something that might be a noise. Nothing. And so I hand it back to the controller and I go, look, I don't know what this noise from the engine is. I then find out that this is the third time the car's been in for this particular problem. Okay, you couldn't have told me that straight up. That might have changed how I did things. one of the things that I would have done would have been have a look at what was done previously in the previous 3 assessments, because that'd give me a clue. It would certainly eliminate things that it might not be. Anyway, the long story short is we end up getting in touch with the customer, and we ask the customer a variety of questions, and we discover that this noise from the engine only happens on the freeway, much like you said earlier.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, okay, well, that would account for why I can't find it. And so we go for a drive, and we discover that because the transmission's not shifting, the engine's pretty much at the engine red line, and it's screaming its head off. And that's the noise the customer's talking about. So it wasn't an engine problem per se, it was a transmission issue. We go and fix the issue with the transmission, and there was a couple of solenoids that weren't responding correctly. We change them out, put new ones on, drive the car, it shifts normally, engine noise gone. And I go back to the quality of information. I lost an hour plus chasing this problem because I had poor quality information to start with. Whereas if they'd gone, Andrew, this is the 3rd time this car's been in, and it's still got a noise from the engine that the customer's concerned about. Okay, well, let's change our strategy. Let's not just do the usual, because the usual isn't going to solve my problem. And so just because there's something on the repair order, just because there is a description of a fault on the repair order, that doesn't equal quality information.
The Frictionless Workshop podcast is brought to you by Solutions Culture. For details on how to get in touch with Andrew, consult the show notes below. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Now, back to the podcast.
I guess the challenge is extracting that information, isn't it? And it's one thing when the customer comes into the workshop and you can ask a few of the questions that you suggested, but how much should be done prior to it? Because as someone who's driven a car for many, many years, and there've been problems on the odd occasion, I don't recall ever being asked to complete any information or think about any information in advance of coming into the workshop. I might get asked, is there a problem? Yes, it's making a noise. Yeah. Fix the problem. But I don't get asked a series of things to test it out, because surely there are those things. That's a perfect example, right?
Yeah.
That I gave you a hypothetical not knowing that you were going to give me the same example there. But of course, it's pretty obvious that there are going to be things that happen at certain speeds that don't happen at others, or things that happen when you turn in a certain way versus others. Maybe it's only happens when you turn right up a hill as opposed to anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, any of those kinds of things. Is there questions that should be going out to clients in advance?
So some manufacturers, I think, do this a bit better than others. Some workshops do this a bit better than others. I call it a menu. I love to give the customer a menu prior to coming in. During the booking process, the question might be something along the lines of, "Oh, Anthony, was there anything else that you'd like us to look at on your car?" And Anthony goes, "Oh, look, I've got this noise, this sound, whatever it is, or this performance issue, or this shudder, or whatever's happening." And the response is, "Oh, okay, tell me more about it." Catch that, and then go, "Can I send you a check sheet, a tick sheet, for you to complete and just send back?" It will take maybe 3 minutes. And it's a menu. Like when you go to a restaurant, right? They give you a menu. Here's what we have. You can't order, lobster at a vegetarian restaurant, right? They're just not going to serve it. And so the menu is what we have. And so we go, is it this? And it's a really quick tick sheet. Tick, 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 tick. They can do it on their phone. There's a million different technology solutions that will provide this. And straight up, we get from the customer a whole variety of distinctions that we didn't have before. One of the first things is that they're all the time. Because if the answer's no, okay, that's a different type of fault I'm chasing. And so giving the customer a menu is a great way. And of course, that then gives you the facility to discuss that with the customer. You said this, you said that, da-da-da-da-da-da. Can you tell me more about this? Can you tell me more about that? The challenge and the reason we don't do this is because of time. Because if I'm dealing with you for an extra 3-4 minutes around the noise on your car, there's 4 other customers lined up behind you in the driveway needing my attention to check them in. And they're in a hurry because customers are in a hurry. Everyone's in a hurry. And so this becomes problematic. But I think some of that can be solved by sending them a menu, sending them a check sheet. The other thing I think is having a framework for the service advisors that we use, the same one we use for technicians, and we call it the quality information model, the QIM, which people from the UK, it's not what you think. It's the quality information model. And quality information has three parts. The first part is that quality information is always explicit. It's always very specific. If you have something like noise in engine, well, that's no good. Would you like a hug? That must be terrible for you. It's not going to help me diagnose the car. It needs to be specific.
Right.
It needs to be specific. You need to be explicit. Okay, what sort of noise? Is it a deep noise? Is it a throbbing noise? Is it a rotating noise? Is it there's so many different characteristics for me to describe noise. And this is the beauty of the check sheet, right? Tell me about your noise. Tick, tick, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. The second thing is that quality information, has to have been tested for meaning. And the classic example of this is a customer comes in, complains about fuel economy. Oh, my car's using a lot of fuel. Well, he's got a supercharged V8. Okay, and compared to his 4-cylinder Corolla that his daughter drives, it's using a lot of fuel. Well, yeah, it is. And so there's not necessarily anything wrong with the car, but what he means by a lot of fuel and what I need to understand as a technician need to be the same thing. I need to test that I understand what they understand, or I understand what they mean. And if that test is not done, we don't have quality information. We're going to have a problem, and it's going to take longer, and it's going to piss off customers, and all of the problems will arise out of that. The third part, and you mentioned it earlier, was information needs to be actionable. So I've got a noise from the car when I turn left into a driveway. Okay, how do you think I should test for that? Yeah, that's like if I don't have that level of explicitness, if I don't have that level of ability to action the info, I do not have quality information. And so it just means that the technician has to go and get it. Now, sometimes the technician can synthesize, sometimes the technician can speculate, sometimes the technician can look for bulletins or other sources of information that will inform them about what's really going on, and they can solve the problem that way. But you can't beat quality information for solving a problem, and it's directly proportional. The speed of your resolution is directly proportional to the quality of your information.
So to wrap things up on this true myth, what great actions do you think workshop owners should be taking to try and deal with this? Because it's not an easy, we've joked about a few different things here, but it's not always easy. And I'm even thinking of the fact that, my car's going in for service next week. And if I think about any problems, it's actually that occasionally the screen doesn't come on straight away and seems to pause but it seems to be random. How do I describe that, even as a customer, and what are they going to do with that information? They're probably just going to go, well, we'll see if there's an upgrade to the software. And that's probably about it. I'm not going to get a resolution to that. And they haven't even asked me that in advance, by the way. So I'm just going to rock up there and say, well, do you mind checking this out as well? So, they haven't had time to look at whether there are upgrades and other things that might be, possible, and do any research. It's hard on them as well if they're not being asked in advance.
Right. And of course they're busy, right? Because they're dealing with today's customers and today's customer problems and all of those sorts of things. And that doesn't leave a lot of time to be forward planning for tomorrow's customers. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we know proper preparation prevents poor performance. And so being able to, even if it means investing some extra time, paying extra overtime, whatever that is, but you need to be able to get ahead of the curve. The better you are ahead of the curve, the more effectively you'll be able to manage this sort of stuff. Having effective check-in process, booking process, and have that question, is there anything else that you need us to look at whilst we're here? And like good workshops do this. And it often prompts people to go, oh yeah, actually there's this thing. And okay, would it be okay, get permission, would it be okay for us to send you this and you return it to us in the next 15 minutes? And have the customer do it as soon as possible, because otherwise it'll just get lost in all their busyness. Set a deadline for the customer for the check sheet. And then I think the next low-hanging fruit is use the quality information model. Have those three things in a diagram. Is this explicit? Have you tested this information that it means what you think it means? And is it actionable? Is there some actionable process or methodology or assessment that I can do, or test or way of use that I can apply that will allow the technician to find this fault? And I think doing those three things, and particularly if you're ahead of the curve instead of trying to play catch up, I think that changes the landscape significantly. And of course, myth number 5 is also going to help us And we'll talk about that in the next session.
Thank you for listening to the Frictionless Workshop podcast. For details on how to get Andrew working with you and your technicians, take a look at the show notes. There's also a link to some special content you can access. I'm Anthony Pearl, reminding you to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.